There's been a lot of lefty on lefty fighting going on the past couple of days, and this is not a joke video like the other one was. It's funny because I literally have a video like from a week ago or something that's like a version of this, but it's not a real beef. It was a joke beef. This is like actual, some pretty heavy duty arguments going down here. So Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report and Kyle Kulinski from Secular Talk got into it over the topic of Joe Rogan. It seems to be a very touchy one for Kyle. He seems to have a really big soft spot for Joe Rogan. He's a very big fan. And so I'm going to read this to you guys. There's a crap ton of tweets to read. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read them out and then talk about them because there's really no other better way to do this than to just read them all out to you. So Joe Rogan appeared on InfoWars today, which is horrifying because we know all the crap that Alex Jones has said. But on top of that, it had came out that today was the day, or yesterday was the day, that that one of the parents of the Sandy Hook victims had, taken his own life, and he was one of the plaintiffs against Alex Jones. So he was being harassed this entire time, and they had I think they had made a fake name about their kids and saying she was living by an alias or something, which is absolutely insane. So people are rightfully pissed off. Like, dude, you're a disgusting person, Rogan, for going on his show on, the day that this happened, or in general, period. That's more of an indicator of the crap that Alex Jones has done. That's not necessarily the trigger to not want to be with Alex Jones. That's just an indicator of all the shit that he's done. Okay, so Mike had quote tweeted a video of that saying Joe Rogan is part of the problem. And he was responding to another guy. He says, I love how your evidence that he's left-wing is that he's brought on Kyle and Jimmy a couple of times. That's an interpretation so charitable you'd have to credit Fox News as being left too, since they bring on lefties as well. You're not being objective, you're being a dick rider. Then Kyle jumps in. He says he's for UBI and Medicare for all, and he says he's going to vote for Tulsi, so he's definitely a left-leaning guy with a lot of asshole right-wing friends. He's not above criticism, but I think people are rightly annoyed at the lumping in of people's beliefs based on associations. Mike responds saying he profits off of right-wing provocateurs for views and clicks while boasting about his progressive bona fides whenever he's called out for platforming the alt-right. Very true statement, by the way. It says, then after someone is introduced to a figure like Jordan Peterson, YouTube's algorithm introduces even more right-wing videos to them, and as a result, he's acting as a gateway for right-wing indoctrination, either wittingly or unwittingly. I'm not saying you should never talk to right-wingers, but he's using his platform irresponsibly by legitimizing people that have grotesque views. Another true statement. Then Kyle says he's a middle-aged dude with the podcast and he talks to people he likes. If you have specific criticisms of specific comments, that's totally fair game, and I join you on many of those. But, quote, he's part of the problem is really awkward tribalist nonsense, and you know it. Then Mike responds saying, it's not that simple. When you have millions of viewers in the number one podcast, you develop a unique responsibility and have a real-world impact. It's akin to Ruben's excuse of, quote, I just like talking about ideas, bruh, and then proceeds to foster a right-wing narrative saying, and then Kyle responds saying, what does that even mean? It's his podcast and he can do what he wants with it. Dave Rubin is a dipshit because he hasn't said anything factually accurate since 2012. Rogan says true things all the time that you're just dismissing because he sometimes says dumb shit and has bad friends. Mike says, Dave Rubin hides behind the facade of I'm gay, married dude, how can I be alt-right lulz? Just like Joe Rogan totally just loves talking to all kinds of people. It's a disingenuous excuse they use to hide the fact that they're trying to ride the wave of the right on YouTube. And then he responds saying, it baffles me that someone as intelligent as you is trying to draw an equivalence between genuine idiot / asshat Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan, who we sometimes disagree with. One is actually playing a game, the other is actually interested in all kinds of people and has shitty friends. Mike says, I'm not saying Rogan is comparable to Rubin morally, intellectually, or even politically, but the equivalence I'm pointing to is how, functionally, they both hide behind their leftism, quote-unquote leftism, to deflect from the fact they often act as signal boosters to the right. I can't say Rogan does this knowingly as Rubin does, but he needs to acknowledge the impact he's having on discourse by constantly platforming dipshits like Jordan Peterson, who lie and fearmonger about trans people. If he does what Destiny does and challenge right-wingers, I would love it, and he often does do that, but by and large, he's inadvertently legitimizing these people who are fighting against what we're both for. Kyle then responds saying, Rogan doesn't have to, quote, acknowledge anything, and he's not, quote, inadvertently legitimizing people. Some of his views are genuinely reactionary. Instead of bitching about what you think his show should look like, provide arguments against the specific claims, and we have zero disagreement. And then Mike responds saying, you seriously don't think he should acknowledge his responsibility as a famous podcast host? Really? I guess he doesn't technically have to, but if my show is being used by YouTube's algorithm as a gateway to the alt-right, if I saw my show on here, I'd course correct fast. And it's like a picture of that graph that we saw where it has a bunch of different, YouTubers and influencers on that graph. Kyle responds saying, oh, please, Mike, they could make a goofy-ass map that draws us back to idiots like near a tangent. My point is your succinct moral condemnation achieves nothing, and it isn't a sufficient stand in for making good rebuttals to specific points, which you often do. It's reflexive and insular. And then Mike says, but the graphic illustrates how YouTube's algorithm works. Not that Rogan is ideologically aligned like someone like Molyneux. It shows that clicking on a Joe Rogan video will get you more recommendations of right-wing shows since he brings on so many right-wingers. And Kyle says, so? That's the nature of the YouTube algorithm. Perhaps they should change it, but that's a separate convo. And I'm not so worried about half these idiots because I find them wholly unconvincing and think most people do too. It's on us to spread our influence and be more convincing. So that's all of the convo that I can find, which is a lot. Here's what I recommend you do. Go to Twitter, look through the whole thing, and there might be some nook and crannies. The way Twitter, sometimes these arguments come down to is like there's different splits, and so it's hard to find the tweet. So, you can go and dig super deep. I think that Kyle also had sent out another response to the graphics saying, "Oh, there's Destiny on there, so it's self-defeating." When everyone, responded saying, "Dude, Destiny is the opposite of Joe Rogan. He platforms them, but he challenges them directly, and that's the whole point of having them on. So there's no equivalency between the two." But the last tweet I just read from you is really fucking crazy, dude. Are you serious? You don't care about half of these idiots because their influence, you don't believe that they have influences that they're wholly unconvincing? Seriously? There's no way you believe that. You're talking about this dude bringing on people like Alex Jones or Jordan Peterson or Dave Rubin or Candace Owens or whoever all these other, pricks are. You think that they're unconvincing? Those people? Dude, some of those people have more influence than you do. Like Jordan Peterson is probably one of the most influential people in sort of online figures as of right now. He's got insane amounts of influence. Dude, these people have a lot of influence. I don't understand that at all. And so Kyle doesn't even seem to be like caring about the fact that, as someone who has the big podcast, you have to be responsible in your platforming of people. So the specific raised grievance that has been raised is, yo, dog, like, I think 2 of his most popular 5 podcasts are with Alex Jones, and you just went on InfoWars, a guy who we all know for Sandy Hook conspiracies, among a bunch of other crazy stuff, but that's the worst one because that affected the lives of parents who had their children were victims of the Sandy Hook. So you're telling, no. That's so horrible, okay? And he was part of that, okay? He was part of that. And just yesterday, one of the parents of the victims had taken his own life because of the harassment that he had dealt with, and all of the other factors that come with having your child a victim of Sandy Hook. So the fact that he doesn't even seem to like care about that or really bring that up, I find to be pretty ridiculous. Now, some of Mike's points maybe could have been a little bit different. But, once you start getting to sort of the end of here, where he's talking about how, like, don't you think that there should be some sense of responsibility when you have the number one, he's like the most popular podcast that exists pretty much, okay, like amongst all platforms. You have to have a sense of responsibility as to who you are platforming. So you shouldn't be having on Jones. You shouldn't be going on Jones's show. That is wholly unnecessary. And the reason why he's doing that is because he has to. Why does he have to? Remember all of the backlash that he got from that Jack Dorsey interview that he did. That's the reason why all of this happened. That's the reason why he had him on. All of that backlash that came in, and he responded to that backlash. And I like the comment that Mike made where he was like, he like conveniently brings up his leftism every time he's like brought up as like, yo, dog, check out all these people that you're platforming. And he's like, whoa, dude. And he gets hella angry. He's like, I'm almost a socialist, bro. It's a very interesting phenomenon, to say the least, to watch that kind of thing unfold. Remember, we did a video, we did a video on that whole thing going down. So this was I don't know. Kyle seems to have like a pretty big soft spot for Joe Rogan, and it just kind of seemed like he, was trying to secure a third appearance. But I also ended up sending out a tweet saying, I said way too much lefty on lefty violence, man, because this happened as I was reading through that. By the way, I want to give you perspective on when I first read this back and forth. And by the way, from reading the responses from other people, it seemed like people are genuinely split on this issue. Now, to give you perspective as to while I'm reading this, as I'm reading this conversation, every Kyle tweet I read, I get more repelled from what he's saying, because the vitriol with which he's saying it and the sort of dismissal that he's doing of like the claims that Mike is bringing up of like, yo, dog, you've got the #1 podcast, you have to be responsible. And Kyle's like, you need to debunk stuff. Like, what are you're gonna debunk Alex Jones? What? What are you gonna start like going after conspiracy? I mean, especially because Kyle's not gonna do that. Well, what are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense. And then you're gonna start platforming like morons, like just all these other people like Jordan Peterson and stuff like that. Like, dude, seriously, dog, that doesn't seem to make much sense to me. And there does seem to, I don't know what the ratio would be, but it certainly seems to be the case that the conservative to left-wing ratio certainly is pretty darn large, right? I don't know what the ratio is. I don't know how. Someone could figure it out. It would take a while to do. But it's certainly a pretty big ratio in favor of conservatives. Just because Jimmy and Kyle were brought on twice amongst Abby Martin and Larry Lessig, that doesn't, mean that Joe Rogan is even-handed in his guests that he has on. Of course not. It's not true at all. And then I had followed up that tweet by saying Kyle really out here defending Joe Rogan like he was his best friend he knew since he was 5, and they've had each other's back since. And that was the sense I got as I was reading the conversation. That was as I kept reading, I was like, damn, dude, like, what is up with this guy? Like, he's super, like, defending and sort of, like, deflecting every legitimate criticism that was kind of thrown at Joe Rogan. I was like, dude, what is going on here? Like, what is this? Didn't make any sense. And so then Kyle responded saying, no, I'm tired of silly left cancel culture that would rather morally condemn and shame than debunk and counter-argue. It's dumb and leaves the left jerking itself off in a corner while right-wing views proliferate. You're smart enough to see this, but yeah, stick to the personality angle. So, dude, what are you talking about? Left cancel culture? No one's saying cancel Joe Rogan. Are we saying cancel Alex Jones? Fuck yeah. Don't bring him on your show. Are you crazy? Is that what you referencing by cancel culture? Do we want to cancel Alex Jones from the Joe Rogan Experience or Joe Rogan from InfoWars? Yes, of course. Are you kidding me? Obviously. Of course we want that. What, you're tired of that? That's what you're... Because remember what the root of this was. The root of this was Mike referencing that Joe went on InfoWars. That's what the origins of this was. And then he says, would rather morally condemn and shame than debunk and counter-argue. Are you seriously going to start having debates with Alex Jones? What? Are you crazy? That's your end-all, be-all solution to this and the huge ratio that exists with Joe Rogan? So, with the Joe Rogan lefty to right-wing or right-winger to left-wing ratio, which is a lot bigger on the right-wing side, who's going to do the debunking if he's not bringing on other lefties? What's funny is actually Joe Rogan knows about David Pakman. He's like referenced him like multiple times on his podcast. And for some reason, he hasn't had him on yet. I don't even know why. But what does that even mean, dude? Like debunk them? Okay, so you're criticizing the over ratio that he has, the huge ratio he has of right wing to left wing. And we're supposed to like debunk from the side as if that's going to change anything, like debunk the things said by those right-wing guests. I mean, we do that, but how does that influence in any way the left wing to the right wing to left wing ratio? It doesn't do anything. It doesn't make any sense. And he leaves left jerking off and in a corner while right-wing views proliferate. Right now, the right-wing views are proliferating. That's what's happening right now. So I don't even know what you're talking about. The left jerking itself. I'm not, and I know that Mike isn't arguing don't have right-wingers on your show. He's saying don't go on Alex's show, don't have Alex on your podcast, and he's saying, hey, dog, maybe you should have more lefties on and have a more even palette. Now, he can have on whoever he wants, but when you deflect from that criticism, then it becomes problematic because you're just wrong. So, anyways, let me know your thoughts on this down below. This is, I don't know, it was interesting, but not all that interesting, to be completely honest with you. But make sure to let me know your thoughts on this down below.